Welcome to the EI Guru podcast, a podcast completely focused on emotional intelligence. Typically, the first question I get is, what is emotional intelligence? In very simple terms, it's how we manage our emotions in our interactions with ourselves and others. Or put another way, it's being in the right state and not being in a state when under pressure. Emotional intelligence is another label for mindset, and we all know that when navigating those important conversations, we need to tap into our best. I'll be interviewing leaders and experts in this ever-expanding field and sharing the data on why emotional intelligence is the difference that makes the difference in all of our relationships. Remember to share and subscribe to the EI Guru podcast, and if you have any questions, you can post them once you've subscribed. So welcome to the EI Guru podcast. And today I'm delighted to say, and excited, really excited, because actually this is a really interesting connection. I wouldn't have got this connection with Caroline Stokes without my son suggesting that I get an AI app and start using it. So I did, because I have to bow down to my children's wisdom. And on this occasion, I used the AI app to start looking at different people that were doing stuff around emotional intelligence around the world. And Caroline's name popped up. So I'm going to introduce her a little bit, but then I'm going to get Caroline to do her own little introduction in terms of a bit of a deeper dive into what got her into what she's doing now, etc. But Caroline Stokes is a human capital entrepreneur and author of Elephants Before Unicorns, which I must admit I haven't read yet, but we're going to do a book swap, so that's pretty cool, which was published by Entrepreneur Media back in 2019. And as an executive headhunter, certified coach, and certified EQ 2.0 practitioner, Caroline helps culture-first innovation leaders prepare their teams for the AI revolution. And you know, goodness me, that's all I'm hearing at the moment is about the AI revolution. After an international career at Sony, Virgin, and Nokia, Caroline founded Forward, which holds the distinction of being the first executive search and coaching firm to incorporate 100 days transition coaching for all talent placements, which I'm really impressed with, because actually so many leaders struggle in that first 90, 100 days. As an executive PCs coach, Caroline co-creates transformative 14-week professional career development campaigns for leaders needing to rapidly evolve at all stages of their organizational and career development. So it's sort of, I mean, I really am. There's so much to talk about. And I've already said to Caroline, I think this is going to be at least a couple of episodes because we're both passionate about emotional intelligence. So the other thing that I haven't really mentioned in Caroline's introduction, which maybe you can talk about yourself, Caroline, is the fact that you've also run a podcast yourself, which was the Emotionally Intelligent Recruiter, which is how I actually found you on the AI app. So that's how I came across you. So welcome to this episode, and I'm delighted to be able to talk to you. So give us a little bit of background for the listeners that might not have come across you around the world in your career so far. So tell me a bit about yourself and, you know, a little bit of plotted history, perhaps, Caroline.
Oh, thank you, Jim. That's a very big question with a very big answer, but I'll try and put it into a nutshell. So like you, I have been a learner. I can't stop wanting to learn. I can't stop being interested in human beings and product and technology all at the same time. Ever since I had access to my first computer when I think I was about 12, and, you know, typing away or using the VIC-20, which nobody will have heard of unless they're in their 50s, that kind of technology, and trying to program. I was really interested in technology. I knew I wouldn't be a programmer. I was far too interested in human dynamics, but I love technology. I would go and work in stores that focused on technology that was evolving, like phones, answering machines, all of those things back in the 80s when they were just emerging. So I'm always interested in, I'm going to use the term cutting edge. I don't think it's always cutting edge, but that's why I worked at Sony to launch the PlayStation as employee number 9. I just had incredible passion and drive to be able to do that.
So hang on. Just before that slips by, employee number 9. I think that's impressive, actually. So you were number 9 in on the
Yeah.
PlayStation. How cool is that?
It was super cool. I mean, admittedly, that was in the UK. So, employee number 9 in that particular office, you had Sony ImageSoft and Santa Monica, you had Sony Japan, and all, did those different entities where they were building, the PlayStation dream. I mean, it really was a dream back then to launch a console that would be successful. And the rest is history. But we were so driven. Today, you'd call it workaholism. But we were so driven. We'd work 7 days a week, because we were so committed. There was no other way of describing it. And but when I was in those roles, so how I evolved to where I am now, as much as I loved doing what I did with the marketing, the publicity, whatever business development that was necessary to reach organizational and commercial goals, I could see the root cause of absolutely everything getting in its way, making it better, whatever kind of algorithm I could see, whatever matrix I could see, the human factor was just of paramount importance. And I remember having the mic drop moment in my mind, which was I was working at Sony, and I was working in Golden Square in London. And had all these marketing people standing around me, and I could see the different dynamics, the different human dynamics, and thinking, where's the training here? We're talking 1995, 96, 97. So Daniel Goleman's book about emotional intelligence had only been out for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So and at that time, nobody was talking about that. Leadership was regarded as something that people would have if they weren't, performing sufficiently or competently. And it was regarded as a bit of a corrective.
Yeah, it was a leader stick, actually, which has just popped into my mind. It was like, which is not leadership, it's leader stick. But I think it was with a stick. It was with a stick back then. Yes. I mean, it sounds barbaric, but actually, I think there's a certain element of truth there. So sorry, I interrupted, but it just made me laugh.
Well, you're absolutely right, because that was the issue back then, and it wasn't seen as a natural progression for organizational excellence, to enhance team development, to develop a culture. It was like oil and water at that particular time. But I was fascinated. But it wasn't until literally a decade or so later that I just decided to put my pencils down, very English saying, decided to just say, okay, that's it. I don't want to do marketing anymore. I want to focus on the human aspect. And that was everybody was saying, oh, that's a really big jump, isn't it, Caroline? I was like, no, I've always been interested in that. I've always been fascinated in how humans assess and evaluate challenges, what they need to learn to be able to adapt, whether or not they have that learning attitude and behavior, whether or not they have that innate desire to be for personal betterment, for organizational development, and so on. The language wasn't there back then. Everything was about psychology, not organizational psychology. And I wish I'd been born later, where, I could have gone down that organizational psychology track, where it was, literally I would have had to have been born 20 years later, I think.
Mind you, if you've listened to Joe Maddox, I mean, he was born similar sort of era to yourself. I'm slightly older than both of you, but he is a organizational psychologist, and he's a lovely human being, and he's got a lot of, I mean, he's passionate about it as well. He's a passionate, why wouldn't he be? He's written a book about it, so, and I'm interested in getting to understand your book. But before we get into that, so you jumped from marketing into HR, and where were you at that time, and who were you working with for at that point?
Yeah, good question. What happened was I was living in Australia for a while, and I just kept gravitating to supporting people in their kind of career transition and trajectory. It was just very natural and instinctual for me. I then moved to Vancouver, Canada, and I've taken a big chunk of my history out because I don't need to bring that up. But fast forward several years, moved to Vancouver, and I had decided that actually my second child had just been born, and I had made the decision. It's like, do I go down the path of continuing with the PR agency that I was helping to build the global one of the global satellite offices, or do I do something else? And it was an interesting situation because my child had been born. He had a lot of he had to have a lot of neurosurgery as a newborn. And after all of the neurosurgery and having to care for him, it gave me the fat in my decision making. It was pretty obvious that with PR, they needed me to work 36 hours a day. I really needed to work 9 to 5 to be able to balance everything. And an opportunity came up whereby I was able to go into the headhunting area, and moved into headhunting, executive search, technology roles, creative roles, studio roles in the games industry. And as much as I loved that, I could see that there was a real issue where organizations would want to find somebody that could just do their bidding, fix a particular issue or grow it in a particular way without actually realizing. I'll bring the oil and water scenario back. You're bringing somebody in who has maybe experienced a different cultural environment.
Yeah.
May have their own baggage, and they join a company, and how do they traverse that and ensure that when they join, everything, or as much as everything, can be aligned with goals? What's missing for them to be able to adjust? How do you create trust, etc.? So that was the beginning of my realization that this is what needed to happen. And then one day I just, again, it didn't happen that quickly, but one day I decided actually headhunting isn't really, pure play headhunting isn't right. Need to be able to support people in their transition, which is why I started Forward back in, I think, 2013, so 10 years ago.
Wow. I mean, that's it's impressive it's lovely that you've been able to connect the dots, to see that actually those people will struggle. And given the significant chunk of cash that organizations pay on headhunters to get talent in, because that's an issue in itself, isn't it, globally, with recruiting talent, because the so-called, and I'm not sure I like the term necessarily, but we've had organizations globally have done a cull year on, and it's been happening for a long time, to the point where actually the only people left are good people. So actually reducing the numbers, when they're having to reduce numbers, good people are having to be let loose. So there's a real grab for talent, and it's a real challenge. So they invest all this money in recruiting someone, which could be up tens of thousands of pounds, dollars, lots of money, basically. And unfortunately, they don't integrate them. So I love the fact that you've connected the dots and you've realized and seen and obviously convinced organizations that this is something that is really, here's your investment. You now need to help them transition into your new culture so that this person can succeed and tap into their full potential.
Absolutely, because I've seen it time and again where people don't necessarily trust the person that is about to join. There's often crossed wires, there's a misunderstanding of agendas, all of those different challenges that can create the headwinds that prevent somebody from being successful. And too often organizations or leaders in organizations aren't able to identify that is an actual truth, because denial is very strong in all of us. And change and trying to rectify that is a lot of hard work. So this great shortcut to ensure that people are able to find out really what the goals are, what the desired state outcomes need to be, and what the issues are that need to be fixed. So that system that I have, which I include in the book, and also just with regards to how it's done, which I can summarize now so people have something to take away, is just really profoundly important. And when people hear about it, they're like, yeah, that's common sense. And it's like, I know. I mean, HR do a great job of creating onboarding programs. They're going to be encyclopedic knowledge on how to navigate systems, but how do you navigate the human dynamics within the organization to be able to reach those desired state outcomes? Because a lot of the stuff is actually unspoken. The politics are often unspoken. The culture issues and are often unspoken, which prevent people from potentially being successful. And when those people are hired, it's not just about paying the headhunter whatever tens of thousands of pounds or dollars. It's really a case of how, if you've hired somebody and it takes you 2 years to work out how they're going to be that they're not successful, or they didn't reach the ideal state outcomes, how much did that new hire cost? What level of retention? When people join, sometimes people don't want to stick around with those new hires, because it's like there's oil and water. There's just no compatibility there, because there's no alignment from the very beginning in the first 30, 60, 90 days and beyond, where you can have those kind of check-ins. So think about, if you lose people, how much is that costing? When you brought people on board for the first two years and they're not reaching their goals, what kind of wastage is there as well? The ROI is just it's a big debatable topic of conversation, and too often organizations don't do that retrospective assessment to be able to say, okay, this didn't work. It's really a sweeping under the rug type of thing, because everybody's so busy being able to just achieve what they need to be able to achieve. So in terms of how the program works, and anybody can take this away and integrate it, it's a very simple common sense process, which is that when people join, just put it into a 90 days or a 100 days program. So first week, I'm talking day 4 of that person's of person joining, you have all of the stakeholders involved, whereby they're all together and you're talking, what are the objectives? Where do you want the company to be in a year's time? What are the issues? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Just have that frank discussion. Everybody will use different language, and they will have, but it provides everybody with the opportunity in that moment to share those goals and to raise it, and for people to be able to see, okay, we have different issues, we have a different vision. How can that be combined? I was talking to somebody just yesterday about Gen Z, and while talking about Gen Zs need to know why they're doing something. They need to understand the purpose, or what the outcomes will be, which I think is incredibly emotionally intelligent. And once they know, they're able to get to it. And it's like, yes. But the challenge is that, if you've got a program whereby in an organization where you don't offer that kind of 100 days coaching when they first join, you don't have a mentorship program, et cetera, you're going to lose that new raw talent that is essentially going to be taking the company through to, the next 10, 20, 30 years. But that's going to be a very different system altogether. So you start off with a kickoff. You make sure somebody really documents that well. You get everybody to agree or disagree and negotiate the language.
Can I just interrupt there for a second, Caroline?
Please.
Are you running that? Are you facilitating that meeting? Yes.
I do facilitate it, for the simple reason that it enables people through the questions as a coach. And as you know, when you're asking the questions, it's done in a way, it's not in a project management style. It's really trying to understand, where the opportunities and where the truth is, and to be able to find out where the obstacles are so that they can be faced head on. That's why my book is called Elephants Before Unicorns. You've got to understand what the issues are, so you're able to move forward with that. So there's the facilitation throughout throughout those 100 days. But the reality is that the majority of organizations, they can do this without it. I mean, for example, a woman that who's now at Microsoft, I worked with her at a different company before she moved to Microsoft, and I worked with her on this program for her when she first joined that company, and she's now taken that to Microsoft. So but she can do that because she's an HR. She's naturally coachy, if I can use that phrase, to be able to create that level of true integration, because she wants success. She's a success and engagement leader, which I think is really, really important. So yeah, that is important. But then you start off with that level of engagement at the beginning. Then you coach people, the new leader, week on week, to identify the issues. Often when a new leader joins, there's a state, nobody will want to present this in a particular, with this level of transparency that I'm about to share with you, because we're human. We don't want to be seen that we're failing. It's, the first 100 days is extremely disorientating for people, even if they're being promoted within the organization. They have to behave in a different way. Often they move from IC, individual contributor, to a leader, a manager. How do they evolve? How do they take off the old brand and evolve into their new brand and their new leadership stance? So that's why I coach every single week for that time. It gets to the point where they're able to transition. Then at the end, and the assessments are done. So Strength Finders assessment, leadership circle assessment, emotional intelligence, EQ 2.0 that I use, is really important to ensure that the leader is able to understand their own DNA, leadership DNA. So they're able, when they're faced with an issue, they can interpret quickly what is going on in their brain from a psychological, let's call it a leadership psychological stance, and how they're able to get through it to that next stage using strengths. So combining where you are from an emotional perspective, so you can handle things better, to then go, okay, here are my strengths. This is how I can traverse that and navigate it. And then at the end, there's a 360.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I've incorporated a new 360, or not a new 360, but a new part, which isn't in my book, which is at the 50-day mark. Bang on the 50-day mark, you have another one of those kickoff meetings with the same people, because guess what? Agendas change.
Of course they do. Yes,
Narratives.
Surely anyone that works in the corporate world knows that the goalposts shift
exactly.
quite regularly. I'm just going to go back to what you said, which I found fascinating as well. You said the Gen Z population, you were speaking to someone and they have this real desire to want to know stuff and the why behind why they're doing stuff. Shouldn't everyone have that scratched? Any employee it shouldn't just be the Gen Z, is what I'm saying. Everyone should be in the picture. They should have clarity around why they're doing what they're doing. What's the purpose behind this?
Yes, I agree with you, but it's, everybody has their own reason for doing things,
of course,
and often with and I'll give you an example of my son. He's not here to defend himself. He's 20.
That's a good time to talk about him then.
I know. He's 20. He's Gen Z, film school. His greatest passion is to get the right frame, the right lighting, and for everybody to be bought into that vision. So he is grappling with those dynamics right now. And he's very creative, and he's looking for everybody to be on board, but he doesn't know how to get everybody on board right now. So in terms of what we're saying about, the purpose, the why, and things like that, I think there's just so much information that people need to receive, interpret, decode, reword, so that they're able to say, okay, this is how it is. The problem is people don't usually have that kind of luxury.
Yeah.
It is a luxury, and people need to earn a wage so they can pay their rent or their mortgage or the electricity bill, or, whatever their education, bills are. And often people just get so wrapped up, which I think is just the human condition are so wrapped up in everything that is happening with the world that they can lose themselves, lose their why, and notice how things evolve in time. And I think we all lose it at numerous stages. You know, on a Friday, for example, we can lose that way of working.
Why the hell am I doing it?
Yeah, what am I doing? What did I accomplish? Is it congruent with my values and where things are going and what I'm trying to achieve? It's a very complicated system to be able to understand for ourselves what is our blueprint, what is our matrix or our system inside, and how does that reflect with what's going on with the world or with the challenge at the moment. So going back to your podcast, which is you work out how people are able to regulate themselves from an emotional intelligence perspective so that they're able to be their best. The issue is that majority of people don't take that time to be able to assess what they're about, what will provide fulfillment, what will provide meaning, what is it that will enable them to truly, you know, soar, and, you know, what they're prepared to negotiate with or not negotiate with. It's very complicated. Life is
well, that's why it's fascinating as a coach, because we've always got stuff to work with, right? So I find it fascinating, and you've probably seen this in your own coaching career, is when you ask someone what is it that they want,
oh yeah,
they just bleat out. Actually, interestingly, they knee-jerk to, well, I don't want this and I don't want that and I don't want this and I don't want that, and it's sort of a whole list of what they don't want. And I said, okay, well, I've got a really good list of all the things you don't want. Let's go back to the question, what is it that you want? So and most people on the planet struggle with, okay, so what is it that you want? And I think it's because we're in this sort of pace, you know, everything's next. The corporate world for the last 20 years has been non-stop next, you know, the phones, the next time emails, all that stuff has really sped things up. So in the old days, it used to be, well, that's a really good question. Let me sleep on it. Let me come back to you next week with a really considered answer. And that's giving respect to the person that's asked a tricky question. But nowadays, it's like, I'm under pressure to answer immediately. Like within 30 seconds, I've got to have a bang response that's really robust, that, you know, satiates that need for knowledge or whatever it is that the client's asking for. So I find it fascinating, that bit. What I'm really keen to understand how you're helping organizations. So I'm guessing, and I'm only guessing, so I want to hear what you're doing specifically and how that might differ around the world. You're over in Canada now. And so what's the environment like over there specifically, or are you doing this globally with global organizations you're working with? But is it specifically, a lot of your work, is it over in Canada, or is it all around the place? And are you using your EI tools to recruit? So are you using that before they get interviewed, etc.?
Okay, thank you for that great question. I'm going to go back to the point that you just made a few minutes ago, which was about asking the question, what do you want? I want to invite people to think, is to plant a seed in your mind, which is, what if you are allowed to dream what you want? Spend a few weeks just dreaming. Give yourself permission to dream what you want. What do you need? What do you want? And just go away and think about it. Just go away and think about it. I had 2 people that I was working with this summer, and I gave them that exact question because I could see they were agitated. They felt like they needed to get a result in a particular way. And I said, how about if I just give you permission to dream?
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, I feel so much more relaxed now. Thank you. And it's like, oh, just do that. So there we go. That's my gift to your audience.
I like that. That's a gift to me as well, because I typically do it a slightly different way. I just sort of say, okay, well, you know, inviting you to use a journal. So in
Mhm.
your journal, on a daily basis for the next couple of weeks, just write down all the things that you want. No, there's no, doesn't matter what it is, just write down things that you want on a
Mhm.
daily basis for the next couple of weeks. Just keep on writing the list down. And then let's come back to that list in a couple
Yeah.
of weeks' time.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
a different sort of way, but I like the dream piece because actually, as adults, we become terminally serious and we think, yeah, well, I can't do that because I haven't got the budget, or I can't do this, and the whole reason why they can't do stuff.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because that's what it's about. You're otherwise, how do you create these new goals without thinking of creating the what ifs and why nots, and
Yeah,
just going down that path. So to answer your question, which was my clients, and do I use EI tool? So even though I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, West Coast, most of, actually virtually all of my clients are in America, which I love. So I've had clients in New York, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Oregon, Atlanta, Texas, DC, pretty much everywhere. I've also had lots of clients in Europe. I've had clients in Singapore, Australia. I love having clients around the world. And I think because I've lived internationally, or I feel like I'm a global citizen. I grew up in Singapore. I've lived in Australia. I've lived in the UK, Ireland, and Canada. Yes, a lot of British colonies there. But I had a real chance very early on, when I was not even double digits, to living in Singapore, to get a real sense of different cultures. That was
yeah,
just probably the most important blueprint for me, which made me very curious about human dynamics and how that all works. But the tools that I use vary depending on really what the client needs at a particular time. I love using the emotional intelligence tool because it
yeah,
enables people to see how they are in a particular situation. It brings forth their stress tolerance, their level of empathy. It enables me as a coach to be able to identify or really help them know where they need to go when they might feel stuck. So from an empathy perspective, let's say they're really low in empathy or really low on self-esteem, which is actually really hard for people when they've got low self-esteem. They're usually very, very stressed out, and I provide them with tools once I'm able to identify where they're at, to be able to give them questions so they're able to ground themselves into for a particular situation, so they're able to evolve. I love doing EQ 2.0 assessments with couples, and I'm talking about people that live together
yeah,
in a relationship, as well as people when they're leaders, and how people may see things in a different way, so they're able to communicate more effectively. And the same tool for strength finders as well. It's very, very helpful, because often people won't understand why their partner at work or partner at home are unable to. They're like, why does this person focus on this all the time? Well, guess what? That's their strength, and your strength's here, so you won't understand it. So this is how you're able to work in a more collaborative and supportive way to partner well. And so it's a lot of fun. I mean, I have to say, it's a lot of fun. It's not like being a doctor where you just say, here's a prescription for this. It's very collaborative, which is why I think coaches are really, really important for people. Coaches. I'll rewind a second. When I was doing my certification as an executive coach over a decade ago, what I found was that there were a lot of psychologists there and therapists, and the penny dropped for each of them, which is that they were like, oh, instead of just listening, I'm able to go into coach mode to help them move forward from this.
yeah,
That was my realization, that actually a coach is so incredibly useful to anybody. Like, gather coaching friends, people. You're able to accelerate your understanding that can enable you to grow in such a more dynamic way.
Yeah, I often think about coaching as future based as opposed to past based. So therapy typically does do a lot of past based
Yes.
stuff, and digs into that in a very deep way, and it's powerful. I'm okay as a bloke, as a British guy, to admit that I've had some bouts of therapy, and it's been massively transformational. Helped me sift through some of the stuff that I was struggling with at certain times in my life. So there is a place for therapy for sure. And interestingly, and I'm not sure about your own experience, but I've only, in the hundreds of people I've worked with over the last 20 odd years as a coach, I've only actually referred to that I didn't believe were coaching or coachable, if that makes sense. They definitely needed therapy, and it was out of my field of expertise. So, I recommended them to somebody, and they went and had some therapy, which was fantastic.
Good, good, good.
So,
I would
go
add,
on.
from a coach to coach perspective, there's a course that I'm about to do. It's with the Psychologists Association, and it's about trauma, being able to read into trauma loops that clients might have. And I just thought to myself, I really need to understand this, because sometimes you can't see what's actually blocking somebody from evolving because there's past traumas, and sometimes they're not going to be aired. So yeah, so I'm going down that particular path as well right now, because it's
Very
fun.
exciting. Very exciting.
Mm.
It sounds like you're, on occasion, you do get to do the sort of the EI stuff with someone before you recruit them. But it also sounds like, if I'm right in hearing what you were saying earlier, was part of your transition, you actually do the strengths and you do the EQ stuff with them, so that they've got a better sense, so you can coach them around that as well as their. Is that right?
Yeah,
Am I writing?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, just so you know, last year I stopped headhunting for the simple reason that I wanted to be a pure play coach.
Okay.
So that's my transition, but I still do 100 days coaching for people that have just joined a company or been promoted within organizations. So that's a staple, and it's just it's my favorite thing. Because
It's my favorite thing. I love that.
it's my favorite thing, because it's the transformation. I mean, the end goal is to create trust, harmony, and for people to be able to move on successfully
Yeah.
within the organization to create the ideal state outcomes. So that's really what that's all about. That's just like so incredibly important. And the other aspect as well, leadership isn't just about, leadership presence. Leadership is also about how people are moving how leaders are moving their organization and their teams and their product forward, that's aligned with ESG, so environmental, societal, and governance and sustainability challenges. So everything related to the net zero goals, which I became qualified in last year with MIT, and also most recently with AI business strategy with MIT that I just completed as well. So, the future organization or the future leader needs to harness all of these different aspects: leadership with people, leadership with self, leadership with business strategy, ESG, especially when it relates to what's necessary for what Gen Z are looking for, and obviously with AI, because the integration of AI strategy is of paramount importance. So that's kind of where the business is at right now. And the emotional intelligence perspective is that we all need to, and I'm going to find a different a term for this in a second, but we all need to be emotionally intelligent and for this. And what I mean by being emotionally intelligent for this is to be able to be open, accepting, curious, to be able to learn and grow, and to be able to influence and socialize, the way forward, because there's no going back.
Yeah, you've just described, I suppose, a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. So no longer no, but it couches quite nicely into Caroline's. Goodness me, what's her surname? Yeah, the lady that did Carol Dweck. It was Carol Dweck who did the
Mm,
mindset stuff on growth and fixed mindset.
mm,
And we can't really stay in that fixed mindset anymore. You've just given a good example of, we need to be more flexible, basically, as we move forward as an organization. And it's interesting because we've not really delved into the EI stuff specifically as such, but you've talked about the reason that you became really passionate was that you saw it specifically. It wasn't playing out well. You knew that the boys and girls weren't playing nicely in the sandpit together. And in the different roles, it's so typical of a global team or a board of directors where they've all got different agendas. So, of
mm.
course, they don't particularly support one another. I'm an authorized partner of Lencioni's stuff because I read his book years ago, The Advantage. I don't know whether you've come across his
I
work
haven't.
at all,
Mm.
Caroline. Really, really good book. It's probably one of the best leadership organizational books I've read for a while, but I must admit I haven't read yours yet. So
That's
yours,
okay. I need
no,
to
but
read yours.
no, but it's sort of like an addition to, so it helps, doesn't it? Sort of, it stacks on top of your knowledge base. But Lencioni's work, you might have read one of his other books, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. So he's got the 5 levels of dysfunction, and of course, at the foundation of that fundamental leadership framework is trust. And
Hmm.
ultimately, emotional intelligence is completely built on that. So
Mm.
if you've not got trust, you can't have healthy conflict. So you and I can't have a healthy discussion. We would just be in conflict. If I didn't trust you, I'd be thinking, yeah, but you're trying to be sneaky and conniving. And there's a reason behind why you're trying to couch this forward and not really listen to my view and opinion. So we don't have healthy conflict. And if you can't have healthy conflict, you don't
Mm.
move to the next level, which is
Mm.
commitment. So I then don't commit. I then don't take any accountability, which then has an impact on the results. So the model's quite robust. So
Mm.
his stuff is really, really powerful. And it's interesting because he did used to use Myers-Briggs, but now
Mm.
uses DISC.
Mhm.
My preference is EI because I just believe that sort of hands down beats all the other models, because actually you can tap into the patterns of behavior. You can see the patterns of behavior within
Mm.
a leader and their team. So I don't know whether you do much team EI stuff or organizational EI stuff, because the people that I became qualified with some 20 years ago, they've got a different model to Goleman's. So I don't use the Goleman model, I use their model. And their model is different. It'd be good to actually have a conversation about that on another occasion, the
Mm.
differences between the models, because there's not a lot of difference. I suppose the significant difference is that the model that I've been using for some time now measures, I think it's the Carlsberg of the EI tools that are available. So it measures the bits that the others don't. So it measures self-regard and regard for others, which comes from, as you know, transactional analysis. And
Mm.
I as a coach find that absolutely brilliant, because it allows me to understand their life positions, the lens with which they see themselves and how they see other people. And
Mm.
it's really, really powerful when working one-on-one, definitely, with leaders. So we can have a conversation about that another time, perhaps. Tell me a bit more about elephants before unicorns, because I know you say it's sort of like laying out your model, but so well, there's the book, and I'll put a little photo on this recording so listeners can actually get it. It's available on Amazon. I'm not sure where else it's available, but is that the best place to get it?
I think it is. They deliver so quickly, and
Yeah.
the price is very competitive. I think that's fine. I know that I was actually speaking with my book publisher yesterday, and they said, "Yeah, got stock in the UK." It's like, brilliant, glad to hear. So yeah, I know it's there. I just don't. I don't know where it's being sold right now, other than Amazon in the UK. So yeah, elephants before unicorns. So I actually have a workplace diagnostic in there that I created, that is is an advancement of the EQI assessment tool that MHS created. And it's what I mean by advancement is more of a societal and cultural awareness on how people perceive leadership in the organization, what kind of stand it makes within the environment, how it communicates, how people are trained, and what have you. So it goes beyond the self, and which is obviously what an EQI a tool will do, and how people might assess you and your behaviors, how you present yourself within an organization, or how you present yourself within the world. But I take it one step further with the workplace diagnostic on how the organization is emotionally intelligent, based on societal and cultural expectations today. And when this book came out, it was 6 months before COVID, before the pandemic. And I remember thinking, it's like, oh, this is such a pre-pandemic book, because everyone's mindset has now changed. Everything has changed. And while there's lots of rationale in here about why organizations need to have more productive one-to-ones, how to support their leaders and what have you, there's so much new context post-pandemic to why we should be doing things in a particular way now. It's the adjustment in language, I've found from a linguistics perspective to be actually quite profound and deeper than I think the majority of people realize. But it's almost like, unless you're reading a utopian or a dystopian book where it's set in the future, when you're reading something from the past that's set in a particular time, it's like there's something missing here. But there's a lot of tools in here. There's a lot of guidance, a lot of practical guidance that enables people to understand how to work with humans so they're able to, I'm going to use the cliche, do their best work, how to create that kind of engagement from the time people are hired, how to onboard them, how to retain them. So that's really the crux of the book, and how organizations need to echo both their internal brand to align with their external brand. Because I'm sure you've heard on numerous occasions how you'll see a company, I'm not going to mention any in particular, but you see their product, you see their brand, you see what they stand for, and then the internal system is actually quite different.
No, you see the values on the wall, but they're not espousing any of those.
No, because there's that gap, that creative, critical gap or tension that is really hard for organizations to be able to adapt to, because often it's just a survival instinct within an organization to keep on going. They've got to reach their weekly goals, their quarterly targets. They've got to satisfy shareholders. They've got to do all of these different things. So this is why I've evolved into stakeholder capitalism, which is looking at how stakeholders are everything from your customer, your suppliers, the people within your organization. How are you bringing all of these goals together to ensure that everybody is satisfied and everything is congruent with what you're trying to achieve. Of course, you're going to be cracking a few eggs in the breaking a few eggs in the process. That's not easy, but that is the future. That is the way forward. Whereas we talk about usually emotional intelligence from an individual's perspective, so they can get on with the world, there's going to be that additional layer. You look at the nucleus of the human being, you've got that additional layer of how the organization, and then the additional layer beyond that of how do you then communicate with the rest of the world or the rest of your stakeholders beyond that. So you've definitely got the 3 tiers there that need to be addressed.
I like that. Actually, it's a really good thought you've sprung off in my tiny little brain. Goes into, that's cool, because actually human beings need to be aligned. Skeletally, you have to be aligned so that your nervous system can operate properly.
Right.
And it's similar to the organization, so they need to be aligned to the organization. So hence the work you're doing is significant. And I was sort of like, oh my God, I can't believe I've found somebody that's actually doing this, and And I was really excited when I snuck a note to you and you came back and said, yeah, let's bang the drum together about emotional intelligence. And yes, we're banging away. And I'm hoping that leaders are starting to, figure this out, that actually to get the bottom line, that requires people to do those things. So to be able to deliver on all those things they're asking the organization to deliver on, it's a human being behind that, and that human being has feelings and emotions and thoughts, and they have behaviors, and some of them might not be aligned to the culture that they're stepping into. So I find what you're doing is actually really nice and refreshing to hear. I'm not anywhere down that. I've recommended the organizations that I've been working with over the years to actually start embedding this as something that they need to be thinking about for recruiting, because what you're talking about is the initial investment of getting someone. So there's a huge cost to that. And then what you're then doing is you're asking the organization to invest on that investment so that it actually yields and they stay longer. So they're happy people, they're engaged, they're motivated, they're driven, they have more energy. And of course, they'll go the extra mile. And one of the big things I've been saying for a number of years with anyone that I work with, one-on-one, is that a leader's most important role is to help their individuals, their team members, grow their self-regard, their self-confidence, their self-esteem. If you make me feel good about me and the job I'm doing, I will go the extra mile for you. And that's slowly, I think that's getting there. But I think that there's so much focus on the bottom line, the target, and the lack of awareness around the impact that, that relentless push for next year, the line's going to go up again, and then again and again. So there's more pressure. So how do people handle that pressure is the role that where I'm sure you play as well, is how do you support those leaders to perform under pressure? Because when things are going swimmingly well, it's really easy to tap into your best. But when shit's happening and curveballs are getting thrown, and you've got hundreds of emails that you're coming back to after holiday, etc., how do you operate under pressure there? That's what I'm fascinated by. And I'm sure you get to play in that field as well, of course.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the pandemic as a great example. There was such a boom during the pandemic. Everything just there were a lot of businesses were closed. Traditional businesses systems were closed because people weren't able to go to the pub or the restaurant or the stores or whatever. So online shopping suddenly surged. Look at Peloton, surged. Everybody was super happy. Games industry surged because everybody had, in 2020 they had to they had nothing to do other than sit and watch games or play games and watch Netflix and and maybe go on their Peloton. So that was it. They had to stay in their bubble, and nobody knew how long that would last for. Nobody could tell that it would be a 2-year process to battle out of that. But what happened, and you'll know this, everybody will know this, is that sales were going up, and organizations didn't reflect to correct the fact that there was this amazing surge, like wartime, for particular stuff, but that it would then decline. I knew analysts were saying at the time, we are going to be in for a major shock with inflation after all of this has calmed down. And MIT was saying the same thing, that it's going to take 10 years for this recovery to happen, and so on and so on and so on. But corporate were just completely perplexed. Why is it that we're not having Facebook ad sales go up? Why have we got this problem? Why have we got that? It's like there was this addiction, insane addiction for it, which burned people out.
Yeah.
Which is why there was the great, what do they call it? The great resignation, and all of these different things that were happening. It's very, very strange time. So what you were talking about just a few seconds ago was along the lines of, how do you keep people motivated when all the targets are going up? And the answer, I believe, to that, whether it's in wartime, stroke the pandemic, or post-wartime, stroke inflation time, which is basically just like post-Second World War, it took 10 years for the world to recover and then go through a new trajectory, which I believe we're in right now. Which is that you've got to get closer from a human perspective to your people. You've got to communicate and be very candid about the challenges, the opportunities, because people can see spin. People can see fake news. They can see when that, that it's not aligned or congruent, and people are concerned about people being laid off, people concerned about themselves being laid off, and that is a very difficult situation right now. Recruiters, for example, are having the worst time, I think, that I've seen since 2007, during the major economic crisis back then, where, because there was that economic crisis, and the same thing happened in 9/11, where there was a hiring freeze, so all the recruiters are laid off, and they're experiencing the darkest days right now, because organizations aren't hiring, or if they are hiring, I believe there's a gap in what they think they need to do, because they haven't done an upgrade on where their organization needs to go, which is being ready for Gen Z, which is being ready for the AI revolution, which has been happening for 10 years anyway. If you've used a chatbot, you've been using AI. If you've been using a system on a phone and voice recognition, you've been using AI. If you've got a Google Assistant, it's AI. If you remember Clippy on your Microsoft Word 10, 20 years ago, that's AI. All of those basic aspects are, pure play AI. And then you've got ESG, environmental, societal, and governance, all of those different aspects that organizations are going to be expected to adhere to anytime soon. So there's a lot going on, and organizations need to really do an upgrade on where their organization and their people need to go. They need a target, rather than focusing just on quarterly targets, because it's too short term.
And that's the same. I used to be in the pharmaceutical industry and worked for AstraZeneca, Boehringer Ingelheim,
wow.
and I was a drug rep. So
yeah, man.
and I used to say a lot that I used to sell drugs, and then qualify that it was the legal stuff. So I'm not some Pablo Escobar fella, but
No,
the interesting thing is, it was always the same. The NHS, and you'll be familiar with the NHS, having lived here in the UK for many years, is year on year, it's about a budget for that year. And if it was a longer term budget, they'd be able to prescribe the more expensive drugs, because that's a clever way of doing it, instead of going from the cheapest drug first, and then if it doesn't work, so 40% get healed with the cheaper drug, but then 60% have to go on to the next one that's more expensive. So, but if you actually get them if you give them first line treatment, which is the best drug, you'd save all that budget. It's because it's a yearly budget that they can't take that other approach. And very similar to organizations, it seems to be that you get to the end of the year, and already companies will be clambering around thinking about next year. But as a rep, we were always taken away on conference in January to then launch that year's stuff, and it's sort of like, hang on, we should have been doing this back in October, getting ready for January next year. And it's still the same, still operates the same way, which is just crazy. But you spoke about a number of things there, and I'm really interested, because I'm certainly out of awareness around the impact and the awareness of organizations around the stuff that you've just spoken to, the AI, the environmental stuff. So what's your sense of that currently? Where are they in the dark with this completely? Who are you talking to in organizations that has the finger on the pulse with this? Are there many that have got their finger on the pulse with this stuff that you're talking about, Caroline?
It's usually the governance governance people within organizations that are trying to influence the level of work that needs to be done, but the resistance is huge.
So is this the risk? Is this the people that typically manage the risk within an organization? Is that?
Oh,
Is
it's
that?
legal, risk,
Yeah.
governance,
Okay.
legal. So I gave this example to somebody quite recently, which is that I remember back at Sony gajillions of years ago, when we had to adhere to a system or a legal requirement, we'd have the legal guy come along, lovely guy, and he would come along and he would sit down quietly and say, okay, Caroline, you need to know that this is happening. And I'd go, okay. He's having this nice conversation with me and I need to adjust. The issue is most organized, and I was up for it because it's like, I don't want to get into trouble. Trouble is not something that we need to do here. We need to avoid those issues because we've got to reach, these ideal goal state outcomes. I did not use that language back then. But what I'm saying here is that if we all sat down with legal and had a roadmap or strategy and analytics now, and we're able to see what's coming down the pike in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, so we could all collectively strategize and collaborate and partner together on what we need to do, so there can be all the adjustments, the world would be a fantastic place. And so these are the people that I believe everybody. So this is my takeaway for everybody. Sit down with these people, find out what's on the roadmap, be open to learning about what it is that's going on. If you're already doing it, that's fantastic. If it's already being influenced, that's fantastic. If you're working your leadership chops on these areas, that's fantastic. If you're not, just start by having conversations. Take people out for coffee, take people out for lunch, because it's absolutely fundamental to see that, so you're not surprised. COVID was a surprise. For example, the pandemic, I mean, this was a universal, everything happened at once type of situation. These situations are happening now with governance, cybersecurity, technology, all of these different areas, AI, which we've talked about, ESG. All of these areas will be impacting how our business operates. It's like how we do that is going to be very important. The leaders in organizations and the people who want to rise up in an organization needs to be systems thinking, needs to have a systems thinking mindset to be able to see how everything is interconnected, so they're able to then put forward the best strategies and execute in a way. The socialization of how that happens is obviously going to start from the top. It requires real leadership thinking to come from the top for the CEOs and the C-suite to set the bar really, really high. And to start socializing the OKRs in a way that isn't just annual. So to answer your question, am I working with people that do that? I work on a grassroots perspective when I'm coaching people. There may be senior directors or whatever, so I'm giving them some kind of guidance on what they could be looking out for, which enables them to contribute in ways that they hadn't before. But then obviously there's the leaders that they're either founders of VC startups or whatever, and they usually, because they're nimble, they have to see where all the headwinds are, so they're able to dodge them or leap over them in a faster way. So it really does depend on the client. The client is every client is different.
I get what you were saying earlier. Well, I get what you're saying about roadmap. What I didn't get was I trying to get my little pea brain wrapped around the AI stuff, which is, so who's having coffee with who? So you were saying go and have a coffee with. So who are you recommending to have a coffee with? So that's what I'm a little bit confused about. So sit down and have a coffee and have a chat, but who with? Is it sit down and have a coffee and chat with people like yourself that are abreast of this, or who?
I think so. It depends on the person. So if I was to start in an organization or I was interviewing, I would want to know what their AI strategy is.
Okay.
And I think I was quoted in Harvard Business Review about this. When you're in an interview and you just see a blank It's because they just haven't thought about it, or they're not necessarily the right person to be asking that question. But in general, ask, what's your AI strategy? What's your ESG strategy? Where does the company need to be? Where does the company how does the company need to evolve? How do you ensure that leaders within the organization are upskilling in a timely way to ensure that they don't leave to the competitors, where people are able to then feel like their career is being managed well, all of that kind of stuff. So if it's at the interview stage, ask it at the interview stage. Don't wait until you join the company. And then when you do join the company, start with the kickoff meeting, whereby you invite people, those people to be involved, so the goals are potentially aligned. Or there's the understanding. So going back to when you were at AstraZeneca and you worked as in sales, so if in sales, you would potentially find that your clients, if it's present day, might say, so how are you ensuring that the plastic materials aren't going to contaminate the environment? That would be an ESG question, for example. How are you ensuring that your customer or client might say, how are you ensuring that this doesn't create financial issues for the end user? All of these different things. How do you ensure that you're able to maintain production of this over the next 24 years? What's your supply chain system and things like that? All of these full system questions that Gen Z might be actually interested in, but to understand that, so there is complete stakeholder alignment and support. And I've got one client that has a value, which is give a shit. It's like people are expected to give a shit. Excuse my language, I hope I'm not offending anyone. It's like, how do you ensure that people are really committed, that they really care, that they have real genuine ownership, that they genuinely want to ensure that the company can be sustainable for the long term? These are the questions that I believe people should be asking, and clients will be asking of these people. So you need to become an expert. There's no such thing as an IC. People expect the person to be the full package. If you remember with the movie industry, it was about 10, 15 years ago, people were considered, this actor, they're a triple threat. They can sing, they can dance, they can skydive. Now it's skydive. Then they can be actors. So a quadruple threat, they're probably required now, like Tom Cruise. And it's like they need to be a triple threat if they're going to be considered as a talent. Same thing in an organization. They need to have the full spectrum of knowledge for an individual to be able to be successful. If they're lacking in a particular area, it requires a very empathetic leader to be able to go, okay, we can see that this person is really great at that function. We're going to keep them as it is. They're happy. That's great. But too often organizations want to see AAA quality standard talent. Otherwise they see that they're not being engaged. So it's about putting that extra effort in for everybody all the time, all at once.
So I'm asking this question for me, and I just want to recap on the ESG, because it's really easy to get caught up in jargon. So I'm going to admit to hearing it for the first time. ESG. I've not heard that terminology, Caroline. So, maybe I've had my head in the sand for some time and just not heard it. And maybe I've not been moving in the right circles. But so remind me of the three things that little short.
So ESG is environmental, societal, and governance.
Okay.
So what it is that you're looking after the environment with the product that you're creating, and the environmental environment. So you're creating products, services that have a far lower carbon footprint, because I can see it coming around the corner. We can all see it coming around the corner, which is that organizations are going to be taxed to the hilt if they don't have a low carbon footprint. It's one of the reasons I believe Microsoft has it, and all these different things to offset it is really important.
So as you say those three headings, I get it immediately, because I then get, okay, well, now I'm I understand. It's just a different jargon that I've not heard before. So ESG, I've not heard in that
Yeah.
phrase.
Mhm.
But sorry, I interrupted you explaining.
No, it's fine. And then with societal, it's about how you're ensuring. So if you're manufacturing products in India, are you making sure that, excuse me, if you're buying products in, or you're producing products in India or Taiwan or Chile or whatever, or you're buying jewelry from somewhere, has it been sourced in a sustainable way that ensures that you're not basically stripping the resources out of the country or the environment or the people that are actually doing it? Are they earning a sustainable wage? Are they being respected? Are the working conditions good? So that's
Yeah, lots of organizations have been pulled up for that, and we've seen some of those global stories, of course.
yeah, exactly. But it also comes back home as well, which is, having that same mentality for your local environment, in the workplace. And as you know, so when with the EU, for example, they will have a different standards, different employment laws, different standards for housing, employment, all of these different things. So, and organizations need to be on top of that, otherwise they get fined.
Yeah.
So when those EU regulations are in place, or the American regulations, or whatever regulations, that's usually the indicator for an organization to make those changes. The issue is that really, from a human and societal perspective, we should be thinking in a sustainable and caring way anyway. That's what Gen Z are expecting, for example.
So organizations need to be abreast of this before they get forced into it, is really where you're coming from. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse, and I've seen it time and again, when a regulation comes in and everything has to change. And it's like, well, where was the 1-year roadmap before that so we could make that kind of change, or the 2-year roadmap? Because we can all see that things are going to be changing, which is profoundly important. And the governance aspect, which is exactly the same. It's all connected with, and it's so deep. It's such a deep system. So ESG, if you look at MIT's website specifically on this, and they call it business sustainability, it's not just about doing the right thing from the planet. It's also, and it's just the way the world is going, because we can't keep stripping the resources being human beings as well, to ensure that an organization can be profitable. It's just a very, very different way of business life that is going to be happening, and everybody needs to have some kind of insight on where it's going, have an opinion. And even if the opinion is negative, at least it's an opinion, but the way forward is inevitable. So people may as well start researching it, even if it's outside of your swim lane, even if it's out, because it's all going to be connected. You're going to be expected to do it. And there's nothing worse than hearing an organization just grumble the way through it. I mean, how much there's such wastage when that happens. Organizations can anticipate all of these activities, because you've usually got legal team internally, you've got strategists internally, you've got analysts internally. There's so much data out there. You just have to subscribe to MIT's magazine or website to be able to see everything coming down. It's coming down, and the change, the opportunities that are ahead of all of us.
I think the AI is another conversation, because it's a big conversation, and it deserves its own episode, Caroline. So I'm going to be asking here and now, can we commit to coming back and having a proper conversation about AI? Because I'll be picking your brains like a little woodpecker, trying to understand, okay, so how's this playing out? What do organizations need to do? So many people that I've heard having conversations about AI are terrified. And this is just the normal folk in jobs. I'm not talking about senior leaders that are talking about this. These are the people that have got everyday jobs, but they're absolutely terrified about this and how it could potentially transform the working world and potentially replace millions and gazillions of jobs. And that's not a great place to be hearing, okay, so what is it really? So because
We
I
could
don't
definitely talk about that, but I think to ensure people aren't left hanging, I encourage people to research it.
Yeah.
Again, MIT is such a great place to, even though a lot of it is overwhelming, it's just become like a pig in dirt and just get into it. Because when you're able to at least start understanding, then that's where the growth comes. And I write about that in my book, From Understanding Comes Growth. But the other thing as well is upskill, upskill, upskill. So going back to the beginning of this conversation, where it's like dream, think about where you want to upskill. What is it that is really going to drive you? Because once you can connect, rather than being all fear-based, which is understandable, there's a lot of people that once ChatGPT came out last November and everybody was, incredibly impressed and scared simultaneously. What was happening is that there was this huge excitement, dread, all of the emotions that you can possibly imagine, all happening at once. Very overwhelming, very unnerving, but it's actually a tool. So AI is a tool that organizations are able to use in so many different ways. And there's automation, it's just all sorts of things. So my TED Talk talks about that. The person that did the foreword of my book, Elephants Before Unicorns, his name is Daryl West. He's author of The Future of Work, Robots, AI, and Automation. He and I got together going, okay, the world is changing really rapidly. Nobody's ready for it. Well, only the techs are ready for it. And the real visionaries could see where it was going. But the opportunity is that these are tools, AI, automation, robotics, they are tools to help us do whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
Move forward. And the people that are scared about it, how can you upskill? How can you incorporate your human knowledge into a technology solution to enable you to do the work better? If you can go in with that mindset, it's going to, you're going to sleep a lot better at night.
Yeah, no, I like that. Instead of being afraid of the unknown, get close to it.
Definitely.
Start
know your enemy.
getting in there. Okay, before we end this episode then, Caroline, can you just do me a favor and just shout out your website and any other connections, whether it's Instagram or whatever, and then I'll type them up on this video in the edit so that people can get in contact with you if they're looking to.
Thank you. So on Instagram, I'm just, and LinkedIn and Facebook, yep, Twitter. It's not Twitter anymore, it's X. You just find me at Caroline Stokes, as in the letter O, Caroline Stokes. And my website is www.theforward.co.
Theforward.co. Perfect. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a ton of fun. I've learned a significant chunk of stuff, so I'm really grateful for that. So thank you. And let's come back and talk about AI and anything else that's gone on between this episode and when we come back and get another one scheduled in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to reading your book. And I will definitely commit to sending you a copy of mine as well.
Awesome.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. Remember to share and subscribe to the EI Guru podcast. And if you have any questions, you can post them once you've subscribed. You can follow me on Instagram at the EI Guru. And you can get more information from my website, theeiguru.com. Have a fantastic week. Bye for now.